Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we are in our 31st consecutive year, I interview writers about their craft, what they're working on, what they've accomplished in the past, what they might be planning for the future. It's a pretty wide net, though, not just writers, although most of our guests are, of course, writers, but we have had on sculptors, we have had on painters, musicians, actors, all sorts of talented people. So if you have an idea for a guest who might be a good fit for the Writer's Block, you watch for our address at the end of the show. We would be very happy to get your suggestions. I also want to point out that the Writer's Block and all the other original programming that comes out of 1623 Studios is a result of cable access television. You don't get this wonderful community service by going to Dish or other means of getting to the internet. Now I'm going to read the little bio of Kate McCann that appeared in her latest book, Sail Away the Plenty, by way of introduction. Kate lives in Weymouth, and she's been writing poetry for over 40 years. Her books include The Small Hours and The Sea's Rosary, also A Roof Gone to Sky and Barn Sour, and then lately Sail Away the Plenty. Her poems have appeared in Three Penny Review, Poetry East, Sonoma Mandala Review, the Texas Review, and many other national publications. She is a triple talented person. She is a poet. She is also a minister in the United Church of Christ and also a social worker. Very talented. Welcome to the Writer's Block, Kate McCann.
Great to be with you.
Thanks for being on again. You were on in 2013, I think. It's been 7 years, so it's good to have you back, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
I'm going to hold it up again, and our editor will splice in a JPEG of this later. This is the book. I'll hold it up. Sail Away the Plenty. Can you tell us something about that title and how you chose it and why you chose it?
Sure. Well, I had no intention of working on a collection about the famine, the Irish famine, and I went to Ireland the first time in '94, and took it all in as a tourist, loved it, and the years went by, and then around 2014. I went to the Ashling Gallery in Hingham and heard a woman speak. All the readers were poets, and then this woman got up at the end. She was a retired professor at Westfield State, and she read this short piece about this brig, one of the famine ships, going down off the Cohasset coast, and it blew me away. I had never heard about the story, and I started researching the shipwreck. And it sent me back to Ireland to doing a series of poems, and it took me back to the famine. And from then on, it was like I've lived two lives, hearing about the famine as a little girl, and then doing the research.
What was the name of that ship again, Kate?
It's called, in the middle portion of Sail Away talks about it. It was the brig St. John. It was one of the many ships that came over. There were lots of them. And all through when I started doing the research for the book, I would work on it during the summer. I was teaching at the time. And the whole idea of the plenty, they kept talking about the plenty in terms of produce, everything going out from Ireland, mostly to England. But then I just started thinking about the plenty, the people and our hearts and I think about it now with you today talking about COVID going on and, the plenty and who's here, who's not, the whole bit. So somewhere along the line, sail away, the phrase came to me, sail away, and then it became sail away the plenty. And from then on, I knew that would be, if it were to be a collection, that would be the title.
So this is a book about Ireland, your heritage as an Irish American, and specifically about the trials of the famine, and specifically often how they relate to American migration
Yeah.
from Ireland.
Yes, yes. And I never would have gone back. I was perfectly content when I went to Ireland for 6 weeks in '94. That summer I took time off. I was living in Missouri. I loved it. I went a typical tourist, it's beautiful, and soaked it all in and wrote, and never happy as a clam. Never would I have thought that I would return in my mind. I have returned to Ireland, and I would view it, the famine was a story, and I was growing up as a little girl. Oh, eat all your potatoes. There was a famine. It was just that they were only words to me. I had no idea what happened. And I think of it now, I almost can't believe it. I was so, I was so naive, or I don't even know. It's like I have two stories of my own history now. So
I know the feeling of being a tourist in Ireland, because as an American, you are a tourist, although everybody looks like your family. It doesn't,
yeah,
you don't feel like a tourist completely, but it is a foreign country.
yep.
I want to ask you during our half-hour interview to read some poems, and I'd like you, if you could start with the title poem, which is a very brief poem, but strong poem, in which the title of the book appears.
Sure, absolutely. Let me go to that. That's in the book is in 3 sections, and that's in the first section, Sail Away the Plenty, 1847. Peas, beans, rabbits, salmon, honey. Ireland to England, 4,000 trips. Stiffest of sails, 4,000 ships. Sail away the plenty.
So the plenty was being exported, even while tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people were starving to death.
Yes, yes.
And that's a tragic irony, I guess, or tragic, tragic criminal economy.
Well, John, and as I was working on the book, I took summers, I'd go over to the library. I was teaching at a local college, and I'd go over to the BC library during the summer, and I'd do a lot of research and use the books. And it just occurred to me that the whole idea, reading the history, and is it a famine, is it a genocide, the whole, all the back and forth. I tried to stay out of all of that, but I'm reading a lot of history where the poems would come right out of, many of them came right out of the quotes and everything. Of course, I made them into poems. But I tried to stay away from that. But I do have a very dear Irish friend. Her name is Kathleen. She's 95. She would always say to me, Kate, it was a genocide. And I always have that ringing in my head that it was, and she's, a dear little Irish woman, but she won't parse any words about it. It was horrible. The British did it, and that's all there is to it. And like I say, I tried to not get all tangled up in that, but it was actually impossible. It's like, as I was thinking of coming on today and talking with you, the whole idea of breath in the human body. I have a poem where I talk about the breath floating away, being taken away. And I think about our last year living through the COVID and George Floyd, and the breath, nobody wanted to die, but the famine, and we've had famines all throughout history, and just the terrible delicacy of life. We live and we die.
Yeah. one of my favorite poets, Derek Mahone, talks about the quick noose of our lives.
Yes.
Very nice.
And I think if I remember, don't you have a poem where you say in it something about to live and then to die? It is a raw sort of humor. Isn't that you?
It is.
Well, there you go.
My sense of humor is lacking sometimes, but life's sense of humor goes on.
Yep.
Could you pick another poem? I would love to hear you read a couple more poems. Can you pick a couple of your favorite poems from the text of Sail Away the Plenty?
All right. Well, I think I'll read the poem. This is a very sad one, but talking about the breath and the whole idea of life. I'm going to read a poem called Crossing to England for Harvest Work.
What page is that on, Kate?
It's on page 42. And it starts with an epigraph from an Irish historian, Cecil Woodham Smith. There were those who were brought over as ballast, huddled like pigs. Others were landed secretly on the Welsh coast before the vessels reached port and dropped by night in the mud. Fever, exhaustion, hunger's hitch conjures an urge to sink, give in to the mud's seductive suck and pull, drop to the knees, lower the head and let go. Let the mind blow out, bright breath, bodies be, float away. Effortless, nonchalant wave of the hand, a grand day.
It's very striking, especially with Mr. Woodham Smith's quotation there. I mentioned earlier, this is mostly about migration to the United States, but this is an example of a ship leaving from Ireland to England, even a short trip, a very short trip, but still as cruel as anything transatlantic.
Yes. Yep.
Where did you do your research for instance, the names of the ships? You have a wonderful found poem in here with the lists of many, many ships, including the St. John, the brig you mentioned. Where did you do most of your research?
Well, living in Weymouth, we have a brand new library now, brand new this year. We've been waiting for it. But I used the Tufts library. I would go down, I had summers off as a teacher. And, but I used, as I say, I used the Boston College library for some reason. I got kind of hooked on that. I'd go in the morning, I'd take a thermos of coffee and, I could use all the sources and go through the beautiful museums and look at the paintings on the wall and the exhibits. They often would have exhibits, and luckily for me at the time, they had an exhibit of Irish paintings and Irish artifacts. One a day, I just stumbled onto that. And I have a poem in the book. I hitched up in one of those tours, where a dulcet takes you around. A dulcet was taking the kids that were looking at the school with their parents. They were going through. And I just jumped into the line and went along with them. And they told this story about the Irish women had this particular stitch when they made her man's sweater. And I wrote a poem called Stitch in the Stocking. And it comes flat out of going around in that as a wannabe with the dulcet there. And it was amazing to just pull from this and that. And the poems just kept coming and coming,
So I want to ask you if you read another poem, but I have a couple favorite poems I would like you to read if you would. One of them is Bone Dust, which appeared in Threepenny Review. And if you could cue us in on Bone Dust.
Okay.
Read it.
Yes. There you go with that Irish sensitivity of the, the hardcore kind of stuff, John, that when I read about this, things happening like this in some of the history I was reading, you just, what can you, you turn away, you just can't believe what you're reading. And, I would take my notes, and at the end of the day, I would go through my journals and pick out certain things. And I came across an entry I had, very long, couple of pages long. And out of it, I just sat down, and sooner or later, it became this very short poem called Bone Dust that begins with an epigraph from Thomas Hardy, done because we are one too many. The heart could break if not for the morning waiting at the door, press of expectant mouths. Workhouse inmates, men, women, and children, sledgehammer stones into gravel, crush animal bone into powder for fertilizer, until the guards discover them eating the bone dust.
That's chilling, very
Yeah.
strong. And that's a true fact from your research. That's more frightening than chilling.
Well, that's how it went all along, compiling, reading, writing, talking to friends, saying, this is so intense, this and that, and just going along and following the flow. The history is much of history is so tragic, and I just kept following the lead.
Can you pick a couple other poems to share with us?
Sure. I'd like to read in the book. There's a poem I found out when I was in the research, that Annie Moore, this Irish immigrant, came over with her two young brothers. She was the first immigrant to come through Ellis Island. And I saw a picture of her standing, and she's got her hat. Well, it's all in the poem, but I'm very taken with her, and I feel like I just grew so close to her. So I decided to write about her.
And what page is that, Kate?
It's on 64. And this isn't about the sinking of the brig. This is a story of her crossing at another time. Annie Moore. What was it like, the final walk out over the fields, kissing your favorite lamb on the head, last look before a hand reluctantly lifts to wave away home? 12 days minding the thump and drone of sea, settled into steerage with your underling brothers, 11-year-old Anthony, 7-year-old Philip. Thursday evening, Christmas Eve, the SS Nevada's 148 passengers make land. America wakes you to the new year, your 15th birthday. Happy birthday, Annie. Infamous traveler, bronze both in the going and coming, County Cork, Ellis Island, New York. One hand raised to hold the hat in place, valise in the other, pressed firm against a blousy full skirt, 3/4 jacket closed tight, every button snug for travel. Eyes firm and fast, the future's pronouncement.
It's a wonderful poem, Kate. It's a wonderful poem. Very, very, very strong and powerful. The SS Nevada is a real ship. I think that's in your list of found ship names. And this looks almost as if you had a picture of Annie Moore.
I did. And actually, the woman, Jean Donahue, did the cover for, all my full-length books, but A Roof Gone to Sky, and the artist who did the painting, Vincent Crody, he's a wonderful Irish painter. And I absolutely love his work. He's done he did the cover of this collection and A Roof Gone to Sky. And I had a picture of Annie Moore, and I showed it to Jean Donahue, who did the cover design of both books. And she said, I've gotten to know her pretty well. She lives in Hingham. She's a wonderful woman. She's in the process of doing something, a sketch, a black and white or charcoal or something of Annie Moore standing with her hand on her head and looking out over the Irish Sea. But of course, with COVID now, I haven't seen her for a year now. But I really look forward to seeing her, and she's thrilled. She's a wonderful, wonderful artist.
I want to mention in connection with this woman, Annie Moore, that your book is dedicated to your own grandmother, Helen Woodis, coming at age 15 over the seas from Galway.
Yeah. And
did you know her?
Yes, I did. In fact, my grandmother lived with us for many years. My parents bought the house that my grandmother grew up in. And my grandmother was very, we had one of those sort of love-hate relationships, let me just say. She was very stern Irish, very strict, very stern. You did it her way. But I loved her. And she, she had all the Irish, if you dropped a spoon a certain way in the kitchen, oh, who knew what was going to happen if you dropped it another way? It was, oh my gosh, there was so much. But again, it was broken into two stories. There was my grandmother of childhood. And then, so I dedicate it to her, and part of the dedication page. And then the other dedication that I should have read at the beginning is to the people that went down in the brig, So those two, the histories, at some point in my life, 50s, 60s, age-wise, they merged together for me. And, I love I'm just so Irish through and through. I love the songs. My best friend Carl would say, oh my God, those jigs and the reels, shut them off. I love it. I'm Irish through and through.
So both sides of your family are all Irish?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
As mine are as well. And I've had people, when I've been in Ireland, come up and start to say hello to me. And they say, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were somebody else. I'm sorry.
I know.
That's happened a number of times. Everybody looks like your family. Which is to say, very good looking people. There's a poem in here I've got checked because it's so succinct and sums up the subject of the whole book. Famine on page 61 is a sort of a definition.
Yes.
Word. Would you share that with us, please?
Yeah, I actually had that when I was looking over and thinking, John, about what I would read. I had that marked myself. And in doing the work, I'd written down in my notes a word without corners, something about, you're reading all about famine and history. And I saw it and I thought, a word without corners. And I just started to work on it. And it was one of those poems. It came very quickly, and it does sort of, it is the meat of the collection. So it's called Famine. A word without corners, no flint nor force to fling. Instead, a wafer-thin cry running hills, barren fields, the sea's mute stay. Halloo! Chambered echo of breath, let go, let go.
Breath, again, as you were talking about earlier in the show, that's a very fine poem, and summarizing very much the emotion or the emotions you feel from many of these poems, reading them and identifying with our own ancestors. You've mentioned the brig St. John that went aground on Cohasset in October 7, 1849. Would you share that poem with us because it's been so important to our conversation?
Sure. As I say, that's section 2 in the book. Section 2 is the far shore. So they're setting out. They're in Ireland and they're heading over. Let me just.
It's on page 50, by the way.
Yeah. The wreck of the brig St. John, Cohasset, Massachusetts, October 7th, 1849. Flimsy fodder, ballast, beam, shiftless shapes of shingle and shard, mica to the merciless wind. Bystanders cannot work their eyes beyond the hellish waves, pinpoint those screaming, real or imagined. Oh, to be of use, not hand-wringing in the wet air, sighs slipping past tight throats, grit teeth. Tragedy, consummate narrative, nothing to do but unleash the tongue to this murderous evening.
Another very striking poem, and it makes me feel immediately much of the pain and the bravery of people who made that journey,
Yeah.
and how frightened they must have been stepping on the ships.
Yeah.
I am sorry to say we're getting close to our limit here. I want to ask you one final question because our viewers are always interested in some nuts and bolts questions. How long did it take you to write and send this book draft off, Kate, from conception to mailing, or conception to publishing?
Yeah. Yeah, we always, as poets, don't we always want to know the nitty gritty behind it? Yep. Well, as I say, I was teaching at a local college and I worked on it over the summers. So a couple of summers, gathering the material. And I think it was, I started sending it out. I looked back in my notes this morning, actually, early. I started sending it out in 2000, and I started working on it in 2014. And then around 2016, I started sending it out. And to be truthful, I really was very, I wanted it to go to an Irish publisher. I started there. I thought, I just thought, oh, that'll really make it for me and, my Irish roots. And I tried Gallery Press, I tried Salmon, I tried a number of Irish presses, and it went around, it made the rounds. And some people, it got some nods, but nothing happened. And I kept sending it out. I'd send it to a contest, or I'd send it to places that took with no fee, the usual that you do it too. And then my friend, who actually is one of the, wrote a blurb for the back of my book, my wonderful friend, Faye George, who died last year, wonderful, wonderful poet, died of brain cancer. She said she had a poem taken with Kelsey Books. She's had many, many books published, and her last full length is with Kelsey. And she said, send it there. They're beautiful books. And I did, and I'm very, very happy with it. So that's how it went, and I'm thrilled. So through the history, sending it just, like always, you get rejections, you get some nibbles, and you just do it all over again. Faye and I would always, who would ever pick this? It's the craziest vocation in the world. And then we would laugh and get together and do it all over again and love it.
I'm glad you love it. I'm glad you persevered. I want to thank you, Kate McCann, for being on the writer's block and sharing the background and the poetry in Sail Away the Plenty. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much, John. And you keep writing.
I will. I also want to thank our TV audience for being with us on the writer's block. If you've learned something about the Irish struggles during the famine from Kate McCann and from her book, Sail Away the Plenty, then the writer's block has done its job. Thanks for being with us, and I hope to see you again next week on the writer's block. Good night.